screening everyone at the door. We're screening twice a shift, actually. So we did every 5-day testing for 2 rounds on our residents and staff, and thankfully no one else became infected with COVID-19. So that was a huge victory in showing that everything that we're doing is working to keep our residents safe. So we still, to this day, do not have any resident cases. With any case or any activity here, notifications to our residents and families, so that word gets out there. And you know, we did have some calls back of people that got misinformation, but we're trying to get that, you know, all of the right information out there. One of the other things that's actually a national thing is every nursing home in the United States is undergoing a focused infection control survey. And those are all to take place before July 31st. We're actually in the middle of ours today. It started yesterday remotely. There's a surveyor from the state looking at all of our documentation, gathering a bunch of policies and procedures, interviewing staff. And once she completes today, she'll then come into the building for a day unannounced before July 31st to watch what we're doing here, making sure that everything is done within the guidelines and what should be done. So far that's gone really well. I'm hopeful that will come out of that well. The state of Wisconsin is also, you've maybe seen on the news that Minnesota nursing homes have opened up to outdoor visitation. The state of Wisconsin has been working on guidelines for that. It's been coming soon for a few weeks now, so we're waiting patiently for that to try and get some more safe visitation besides the window visits and the virtual visits and whatnot. As part of the COVID-19, we also were able to do some CNA training in-house. We're fortunate to have a WITC instructor who's also a casual nurse here, so she's been helping us with that. So we're in the middle, towards the end of getting 9 people certified, 4 of which were already our staff in activities and in the kitchen, and then some other people that were interested to become CNAs as well. That's kind of, you know, of course, what's going on. A lot of education and training and doing our best here with COVID-19. We did just receive our audit results just this week. That, of course, was also delayed due to COVID and a lot of remote working and those sorts of things. So we will be presenting that at the August meeting. So far this year, we are operating in the black. You know, with census down, it's been tough, but we do adjust our expenses as much as we're able, obviously, with all of that. And one other note, I guess, with the testing, just to kind of go off what Brian was saying too, our testing is all covered by the state. They're paying for that testing right now. But with that, currently, we have to send all of those tests down to Madison through a courier. And those results return anywhere from 48 to 72 hours later, which, you know, makes it really tough because you send in tests on Monday and you don't find out until Wednesday or Thursday that that staff member is indeed positive and has been working those days. So I know the state is working with other labs and trying to make more of a regional plan for that. So that will be nice if we can get to that point to be able to identify these asymptomatic folks earlier. Any questions on any of that or anything else? I can't hear you.
All the facilities are working good.
Sorry, I can't.
All your facilities, your new boiler and everything is working well.
Oh yeah, the boiler, is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, sorry, it's really fuzzy on my end. Yes, yep, that's all going well. Everything's working as it should. Yep.
Any more questions for Dana? I appreciate it. You had an awesome report, and especially going month by month with the situation we're in. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Now Number 9 is discussion items. Dr. Vince, do you have anything under discussion that you would like to present that'd be helpful?
Yes, under A, the budget priority discussion, I'd just like to mention that as you were aware, prior to the last board meeting, we had a workshop on setting priorities beyond what's important over the next year, but rather what is it that's important to us longer term, now and longer term, so that we could start the process of really conducting some game changers and doing things that will affect the future of the county. Since that time, we've met with the divisional staff as well as some of their top lieutenants to talk about what we are currently doing related to the priorities and what we think we could do going forward to give some ideas. The next step will be to come back to the board, and all of the board members are invited for another workshop from 3 to 5 p.m. On the afternoon prior to the board meeting. We'll have dinner again, so you'll have not this coming Tuesday, the following Tuesday. Yes, thank you. And here's the good news. I think it's pertinent to this committee. If the priorities that were established, 1 was reduce substance abuse, 2 was increase public safety and reduce crime, 3 was expand broadband, and 4 was improve parks, tourism, and recreation. And when you think about it, the next step, each division and their top folks have met, talked about what pertains to them and what are some ideas. You'll be able to look at those ideas, add to them, delete them, edit them, whatever you want to do. But when you think about those priorities, obviously, reducing substance abuse pertains to this committee right now. And we do, as you know, Tanya has done a great job and her staff at working with that, and we can think we can do more. Public safety and reducing crime also deals with health and the families that are affected. Expanding broadband. To me, what we've learned is what used to be railroads, what used to be highways. Now populations are going to conglomerate where they have access to high-speed internet. No better time to see that than right now with the COVID situation. People are working remotely, and we've all had a lot of new neighbors lately, right? Because they're working from home here in Polk County. Some of those people are going to decide to stay here if they have access to internet, health, education, and those types of things. So we look at this as an opportunity. Parks and trails. I mean, the lady in public comments talked about the importance, what it means to her mental health, what it means to our physical health. If we utilize our natural resources here in this county, we have a great advantage. So all these things are related. This committee, this will be tasked with identifying your priorities going forward. What is it that you want to act upon? What the time frame is going to be, and we're going to look at it not only from over the next year, but what about 3 years? What about 5 years down the road? So that I can start with my staff planning budgetary needs and techniques and methods to have resources available to attack those things.
I wonder if every person feel like there are parks are highway committee travel all our county roads. Last Sunday I went to the Hemingway and the Apple River there. Boy, that's one of the nice. There are so many facilities.
Yes, and I would say also maybe it requires better marketing and communication on our part. It may also mean updating or refreshing or changing some of those facilities or parks so that they're more appealing and people will actually look for them and utilize them more. And that relates to the Parks and Trails advisory group that we're developing, to not just look at, as someone once said, 13 miles of gravel on a trail, but rather the whole county. And what makes sense from a whole county perspective, a broad perspective, where should we dedicate our resources and time? How can we coordinate so that as many people as possible can enjoy this county in the most proficient and enjoyable way? And so I think we're starting on the right track here by stopping dealing with issue by issue, but rather thinking long-term and proactive.
Many of these parks actually are adjacent to the river, by interstate, Apple River.
Chair Nelson, could you use your microphone, please? They can't hear you again. I mean, bottom right, sorry.
Short memory. But really, we like Lotus Lake down here, nice park all along there, and people outside of our state are always interested in parks and those type of things.
Yes, I met with the secretary for tourism been a year and a half ago.
Oh, she's awesome.
And she said, I've never been here before, but I can tell you right now, focus on outdoor activities in western Wisconsin.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's a message to me and to the tourism board. And so we want a representative for tourism to work with us on this group. We want to maximize, the old story of Tiger Woods when he got into golf, whether you like the guy or not. I'm not saying I do. But he thought he was going to be so great. When he became pro, the first thing he worked on was his strength, his driving, and he improved it to such a level that he was untouchable. This county has certain strengths that I think we should maximize to make us stand out. And we're going to work on the other things too. The water, outdoor recreation is our.
That girl travels the world and advertises for us.
Yeah.
Amy.
Before I bounce off what Vince just said, Fran just texted that she can't hear us. So everybody keep your mics up. I think she could hear you, but she wasn't hearing some of our earlier.
I
Anyway,
would suggest talking into the top of it and don't put your hand around it like that. That might help. And use that old baritone voice. Yeah.
but just to build on what Vince said about this Trail Advisory Committee, if there's any fellow members that have a person that you would recommend that might have both health and outdoor, or maybe Rita, you're interested in this committee, we would love to have your applications. They're actually due Friday. We might, I don't know, need to extend that because of COVID and holidays.
We will extend that if necessary. And I will say this is not just, hey, give me some volunteers, give me a warm body. We're going to have an interview process, because this is not the type of committee that if you bring somebody who's only interested in one event, one activity, and they're only going to promote that, it's not going to work here. We want people who know about each activity, are committed to it, but they got to think bigger picture, longer term, and they got to be able to work with other people. So we are going to set up an interview process and an evaluation process. So we need people to join us.
And Amy, thanks for your work on that committee, because when that gets finalized, that's going to make a huge impact on economic development. I think that's what's driving it.
Tanya, anything else on the discussion items?
No, I think just a quick comment that our leadership group is doing a really nice job of pulling these priorities together and coming up with a plan for the county board.
Thank you. Let me, as a reminder, Bob Kazmierski has been working with UW Extension and Don Wortham, and in conjunction with all of the leadership team, the division heads, Malia Malone, Don Burrows, and the Sheriff's Department, The stuff that you may not see them do, I'm telling you, they are all stepping up here and doing things that you may not have known we've ever done before. So I'm really proud of them.
And Lee, I know you're involved in a lot of that. Do you have anything under discussion item?
No. That is highly unusual. You're probably saving it all for Tuesday night. Anything else, Tanya, that we need to address?
Yep, so we do have the discussion on the CAFO resolution, and we've been working with Amy on what that should look like. And Bob was here to give an update, but he must have had to step out, so if he comes back, we'll have him give an update on what's happening in Environmental Services Committee on the CAFO conditional use permits. But for now, I think I'd like to maybe turn it over to Amy as the sponsor of the handout that was on your desks when we came in.
And that's a discussion item,
Discussion,
not in resolution form.
action down below, but I think it's more from a resolution into a motion for a recommendation to Environmental Services Committee based on the work that we've been doing back and forth and timelines and trying to be timely about what we want the Environmental Services Committee to hear.
Yeah. This definitely has morphed into something more like a motion so that we can be a little more nimble today and move things along so that the environmental services can hear from us. Otherwise, sort of the process continues on and we might not be able to just hit the timelines. So I don't know if you want me to go through this. I'll just hit some of the highlights. We, as a board of supervisors, we can do these resolutions, ordinances, whatever. We know that CAFO developers are looking at Polk County. I don't know if you've heard about that issue. We know that American Public Health Association has a policy statement advising to really have a moratorium on new expanding CAFOs. We've done that. Their data is some of the stuff that I look at and kind of use for understanding the public health side of a CAFO. We also know that they did another one in 18, looking at also CAFOs. The next one down is we have the expense side of this. CAFOs have a fairly expensive impact on counties to understand the front end of health, water, air, some of the engineering pieces. And so I'm always trying, I have my bookend thing where I'm always wanting us to have the front end of anything that we do, the taxpayers aren't on the hook of, and on the back end of anything we do, the taxpayers aren't paying for a dump and run situation where a CAFO leaves. To finish also the groundwater piece, we do know that groundwater data is out of date, and I've been talking to staff about this, and we do know that maps that are existing have nitrogen levels that are increasing and expanding. So we kind of want to get ahead of that and look at this information proactively. And then last is this committee passed recently this concept called health in all policy approaches. And it's the concept being that you would look at health through the lens of, look at public health and look at all policies through the lens of this public health component. And I know we did one before I was on this committee for the Stour process, and this is asking that we have also one for the CAFO discussion. And then lastly, in this, we asked that the Polk County Human Health Services, what did I say? Oh, we got a public health. Did we say that right? Health and public?
Health and Human Services.
Okay, sorry, excuse me.
Yep.
Environmental Services can consider that when taking action on any permit and or any ordinances, because there are discussions about those in the future, that we take into account public health. what we were sort of thinking is that this should be something that is the standalone, not a standalone, but a standing sort of thing that this committee wants, so that if there's another phase 2 and there's an ordinance, that we don't have to necessarily come back and reiterate this, so that this, the and/or is also including a future ordinance. So I can take any questions on this for now. And do you have anything else to add that I missed?
I do not, Malia, do you have comments?
Well, so a couple of things. As far as if the goal is to set a county policy, that whether we look at a citing ordinance, whether we look at a Bayfield or similar ordinance, or whether we look at the CUP, that the county considers everything above here, then that's something I think would take board action. I don't think this board can set a policy, which is kind of what it's doing. So I totally understand what I think the ultimate goal is. So perhaps, and I'm just offering this as an option, perhaps what we could do is either have this sort of amended to ask me to draft a resolution for the full county board that would require this. We could do that. And I'd be more than happy to do that. Or if you just wanted to, rather than having something formal, because again, this board, when it's acting as a subcommittee of the county board and not acting as its statutory health and human services board obligations, can only advise the full county board as to setting policy. So that would be just sort of a procedural thing if you wanted me to draft that resolution. And I think clearly what's on the agenda today would lay the foundation for you to do that today. And I'd be more than happy to draft a resolution that would cause the county board then to consider adopting this particular policy direction. Does that make sense?
Just, that does make sense. And that's why Tanya and I have been going back and forth on whether to ask you for resolution, but because the timing between the date of this committee and environmental services, getting back to them to say, we think else should be considered in this conversation, and then go through a resolution, puts us down the road a couple months, right? So how do we communicate to the environmental services when they have this really fast timeline that we want the health component with a resolution that might not come up?
Sure, I think you could just send, if you did a motion to communicate, for this board to communicate its desires of X, Y, and Z to environmental services, that's not creating a county policy. That's just saying, we are having a formal communication from this committee to that committee. Here's what we want to make sure that you consider. I think you could do that without the formality of sort of the written thing, and then send your designee to the next ESC committee to say, this is what we discussed and this is the viewpoint of our board, and we want to make sure that you as a ESC consider this as our, viewpoint from this board.
Could we do both?
You could do both. I mean, I'm not going to advise you as to the best route, but there's nothing prohibiting you from.
Yeah, that would fit both the formality of a resolution and the timeline of the
Brian Chudwinsky, we listened for probably an hour yesterday on KFOs, and we got opinions from around the state, and I know you took down some notes. One of them, there was a lot of talk about legality of different aspects. Right now, we have 5 KFOs in Polk County, 1 poultry and 4 dairy that are pretty much grandfathered in the KFO situation.
Yes, sir. Supervisor Butterprice. Well, first of all, it was a pleasure to sit through the WCA Agriculture, Environment, and Land Use Subcommittee. And oh, by the way, hello, my name's Bob Kazmersky. Bob. I'm the Environmental Services Director, and my governing committee is the Environmental Services Committee. But back to Supervisor Bonaprice's observation, I would invite you to look at the packet or the materials from yesterday's WCA meeting. There were several resolutions that are being forwarded on to their annual or business meeting in September, where it'll be voted on, and that's how they, at least through a county association, that's how our state legislature is aware of local issues, and then they craft policy and so forth. There was, and I know you mentioned, and I think you, John, you passed out the one, yes, sir, yeah. They have a, we're curious about that. Bayfield's moratorium is exactly that. It's for 2 years. They are actually sort of taking a time out, and they're doing a scientific-based, research-based study. We at the county did sort of a literature review. They are taking a more academic approach where they're actually going to work with specialists, scientists in identifying the impacts, both positive and negative, of large-scale livestock facilities on 4 learning objectives. Again, groundwater, its impact on surface water, air quality, and quality of life. And the interesting thing about that particular resolution was an output or a product of that 2-year moratorium is not only that analysis, but rather than it being a guiding document for decision-making in Bayfield County, it'll be sent to both the governor and the state legislature. And so you could think about their intent in a lot of different creative ways, but it might be an approach to ensure the state, particularly those 2 agencies that regulate large-scale livestock operations, such as DATCAP and Wisconsin DNR. Maybe it's an effort to ensure that their oversight is more robust, or they need to refine NR 151 or Chapter 93 or 92 of the state statutes. Those are the statutes that give the DNR and DADCAP regulatory oversight over livestock facilities that have over 500 animal units. And so maybe they're looking at a policy or statutory change, or they're maybe looking at providing more resources for those state agencies, but that's where that's at. And as you know, in my committee, we are looking at any type of local control. And when we started this whole process, and this kind of predates me, my committee was given 2 choices. They were giving the path of a conditional use permit path or a siting or operational path, and they chose the CUP. And in a way, it's one effort for our county to have some type of local control, because ultimately those large-scale operations need to secure permitting from the state agencies, along with whatever restrictions we want to put in place. So the efforts from our committee, that conditional use permit, are some conditions that we feel are attainable, viable, and will get compliance. And that's what we're looking for. So I just thought I'd share that with you. But I don't know if that answered your question, John, or I went overboard, or I do know that we're on the agenda, and I don't know, Supervisor Bonaprice, if you wanted us to go through what our governing committee has done for the months of June and July. I notice it's agenda item 9C, unless you're not there yet.
I think the two big things that we took home, Brian, from yesterday's conversation from around the state was, number one, they felt that research, scientific, that there were so many unknown things that they wanted, that we needed to bring to the forefront, and they also was the legality with debt cap and the DNR. So everything would be on a state level. First of all, compliance with the state level, and still respect the local control.
Right, yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, we're down this path for a conditional use permit. That's one piece of local control. Siting or operational ordinance, another piece as well. And so they're definitely restricting us to go on that path. We need to. And it sounds like there's some capacity being built for that. So it's just a matter of, does staff have the capacity to administer a siting ordinance? And do you want to look at all livestock? Right now, we're just looking at swine.
And those were the comments where you couldn't have anything. They thought if you had just a swine ordinance, that even if it went to the Supreme Court, that they'd say, well, no, you're germane to one industry.
I don't know. I might be part of the idea, but we're just targeting one type of animal operation. Granted, pigs, when I'm told.
And they thought that was discrimination, basically.
Right. So there's that health and human hazard piece, so that might be what's your leverage to respond to a swine came from. They ask you, why are you just directing these restrictions on swine and not other ones?
And the other consensus, I think, was that from around the state, the comments was that the local control like us need a lot more scientific and a lot more information, and some of it hasn't really evolved yet.
Question is, to you would be, has Bayfield County any idea what their 2-year study is going to cost? And is the county going to pay for that? Is the county going to pay for that study?
Supervisor Bonaprise, did you hear? Did they talk about cost at all?
There wasn't a lot about cost on the local level. They thought that we needed so much more on the state level as far as scientific on water quality and different areas. They wanted things more complete on the state level. They've got the resources.
Looking at the WCA potential resolution, it doesn't look like it's specific just to Bayfield. They're just the sponsoring county, so it would be a statewide study.
Yeah.
So I don't think Bayfield County would be footing the bill for that study. I think there would be legislative costs.
This is challenging if you look at the geography of the state of Wisconsin. Coolies, elected for them, here we have all this collection of water. I think the challenge, that's one of the main issues we have with some of our regulations and apply statewide. Yet some areas of the state, like we are in county, we have a lot of water. A little more sensitive to some larger scale operations.
Yeah, they thought there was areas in the southern part of the state where was more adaptable to just land and wouldn't interfere with water quality and stuff. So they didn't think we were a good area for expansion, where they would designate different areas that could be.
There's a fire issue.
Dr. Bill.
Not so much a question, I guess maybe just a comment. I think that it's important that, and I think the Environmental Services Committee has heard this committee, at least part of that, because we had representation there. But I think it's important to remember, and Maria, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think that in Wisconsin, Chapter 254 indicates that this board has the power for environmental health. And that's what we look at. And I think that Bayfield County, in looking at doing a scientific study, they're doing the correct thing. And looking at the amount of water that we have in the county, the air quality. I think Mr. Netherland talked a little bit about tourism and what would happen, if we are not palatable here in the county, that people don't want to come in because of certain operations that are going on. But I think if you look at the public health and you look at it from the priorities of this committee and the way the department is set up, they want to investigate any health problems that we have, and this could be one. One of the other things is they want to work off of evidence-based programs. And unless we have that information, we're just flying by the seat of our pants. And then last but not least, Ms. Malone talked about policy making. I think according to Wisconsin statute, this board can and should make policy. And we have that power to do that. And we can recommend to the county board based on that policy what we think and what we feel. And I think it's important that they listen to public health as to what we think is the best procedure to follow. And I think based on the recommendations from, as Mr. Netherland indicated, from our supervisors and the lieutenants that are in each area here, that we listen to their advice. And we certainly listen to the public's advice. It's extremely important that we do that. So I think that from my standpoint as a member of this board, I certainly would support this resolution that they would enact a moratorium, or they would enact, however Ms. Malone would put it, a resolution or an ordinance until some of these scientific studies come out so that we can follow what they have to say. The end.
I fully agree with everything you said, and I would certainly want to have some scientific studies before a conditional use permit is granted. The second thing I'm concerned about is that reading this Bayfield County thing where they say that that the Legislative Audit Bureau 2016 not administer this program consistent with the Clean Water Act and Chapter 283 Wisconsin statute, and they don't have enough. I think they did not have enough staff to monitor the CAFOs, and so if this county gives a conditional use permit, who's going to monitor this? Is the DNR going to monitor this? Is the health department going to monitor this? What is the cost of monitoring of a CAFO? And does the CAFO, the person proposing the CAFO, do they have any responsibility to do some soil testing and water testing and airborne testing, or is the Polk County going to be stuck with the cost of these things?
Good questions.
Good questions.
You're probably looking at them.
So before you get my grant.
One of the things that I think there's a little confusion about is right now, CAFOs are simply a permitted use. You don't need a conditional use permit. The conditional use process that's happening or being contemplated in Environmental Services Committee is an additional regulation. Right now, they don't need to come to the, no proposal for a CAFO would need to come to the county to get a permit. So if the CUP passes in environmental services and then ultimately passes by the county board, that will be the county's very first ever attempt to regulate in any way beyond what the state does on its own, CAFOs. So it's not saying we're creating this conditional use so that you can now come in and open a CAFO. It's saying before you didn't even have to ask us, now at least you have to ask us. That's one thing I think there's a bit of confusion about.
Thank you for the clarification.
Certainly.
John, I think another one there is, isn't our, from what I've heard from the county board, isn't a lot of criteria of 500 animal units, where Bayfield has 1,000 animal units, and they thought the discussion we heard yesterday was that 1,000 it was probably more practical and wouldn't be so subject to lawsuits as to a definition between swine and 1,000 units seem to be more adaptable, less court action.
Well, Malia, if I can ask you a question on when you have, if someone applies for a permit, who determines whether that permit is acceptable?
It depends on what you mean by permit. If you're talking about if environmental services and the county board ultimately create this conditional use, is that what you're talking about?
We'll start with that, yes.
So that would go to the Environmental Services Committee.
Okay, so
public hearing.
Okay, so if we take that scenario, then let's say that it goes to a public hearing on that. So what happens if, let's say, the permit is denied?
Well, they could appeal that to the Board of Adjustment, the decision of the Environmental Services Committee. And let's say the Board of Adjustment upheld the denial, then they could take it to circuit court and ask for a writ of cert where they review the agency's decision, the ultimate decision to deny. And then the circuit court would be asked to determine whether they followed the correct law, whether they acted arbitrarily or capriciously and imposed their own will rather than their judgment.
Okay, so if we go back to that writ of certiorari, so if there was something in place in the county which would give a basis for denial, could that basis of denial be based on an ordinance and or policy and or resolution that the county board has passed to allow that permit?
Well, so that's a really deep question.
I know that, that's why I asked it.
And I guess my best lawyer answer is it depends. And right now there is the issue of preemption.
Correct.
So that would be the first hurdle I think that the county would have to overcome. If our resolution or ordinance or policy was something that was not based upon scientifically identifiable, specific to Polk County information, that we had the process and was approved by DADCAP and DNR, assuming they actually go through the process of approving. Because statutorily and under the current administrative code, all of those things are hurdles to any county imposing greater restrictions. So if we could reach that burden and make that argument, then there's a shot.
So the burden of proof would lie on the county to prove that we had a timeline set up in place. We have done our own investigation, and this is the reasoning why this ordinance or resolution, again, play on words.
Whatever the limitation stems from, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate your answer.
Thanks for the discussion. I'll allow any comments from Tim as Chair of Environmental or Jason Cheezick from our zoning. Have any comments? Anything you could, we'd appreciate anything you can add.
just here if you have any other questions. And additional use criteria, and now, like it's been said, that currently we are
Okay, can you hear me now? So basically, as it's been said, in that there is nothing in the ordinance right now, that this would be the beginning steps to doing, and that the CUP process. By no means is it one or nothing. You know, that the county could still look at developing an operational based ordinance into the future, even with the CUP, and that the CUP would be a start as part of the CUP process, and that the Environmental Services Committee at the public hearing can take and assign a bunch of other information or studies to be done by the applicant so that they have the information that they need in order to be able to make a determination on the application. And in the proposed text, and that we have that cost for those studies and that being incurred by the applicant. So in other words, that if they wanted groundwater testing, if they wanted to see how deep the groundwater is by that proposed facility, they could put that as a condition. The applicant would have to go back, get that information for the committee and bring it back to them, all on their expense. So the conditional use, when you're developing your criteria, typically it's a really nice approach because you want to keep that criteria smaller and you want to keep it so that you can justify that on all the properties in Polk County. And then as the specific properties come through for an application, then you want to narrow it down and be more specific, because a property in the town of Sterling out by the Wolf Creek, and that might not have the same physical property features that a property in the town of Clayton or Alden would. So that's really the benefit of this. Whereas an operational ordinance, basically they come in, they say, yep, here's the criteria, and then I get to operate free and clear. And so that's the big thing, is the county and the local policymakers are going to have a lot more control with the CUP process than an operational ordinance, no matter how much you put into it. So that's all I have.
There's just a couple loop back. Bill, were you thinking, or maybe you weren't thinking, but this ordinance from the Bayfield piece, should we do a motion of support? You sort of were heading that way, and I didn't know if that's where you wanted to do. Like, we could have a motion that comes out of here, and then it goes to these guys that Polk County's Health and Human Services supports this.
Yes.
Bob, you want to make that one? Bob,
I wanted to just share something with you. And it's about the process timeline and where we're at. Again, speaking on behalf of the Environmental Services Committee. Well, at our July 8th meeting, which was last Wednesday, we witnessed a lot of video testimony. Jason collected roughly 150 written comments. And the committee, via consensus, decided, rather than add or subtract or refine the conditions within the current conditional use permit, we should, again, take a step back and hear from this committee, Health and Human Services Board. So I'm just sharing that with you because on July 22nd, and so the agenda is posted and noticed, there is a line item for this body to respond to the work that's been done in regards to the conditional use permit. So I just want to share that with you. So there is an opportunity, and I can guarantee whatever outcomes you come forth from here will be part of the discussion at the Environmental Services Committee next week. And just one other quick thing, I just want to kind of piggyback on what Jason's been saying. We're getting the impression there's a lot of misunderstanding in the broader community about the conditional use permit. again, this is about local control. And the path that our governing committee is taking is the sort of the path of least resistance, which is being creative and identifying conditions that are realistic, easy for any operator to comply with, and reduces any liability on the county as we make land use decisions. And, you know, listening to all that public comment and written comment, we get a sense that folks just want us to reboot. In other words, forget the conditional use permit and start over and do a siting or operational ordinance, which is fine. We can, but I just want to share that with you because some work has been done, a work that will muddy the water for a potential developer. Not only do they get vetted and need to secure or procure permits from 2 state agencies, but they have to go through the county and meet these certain conditions. Maybe the conditions aren't, you know, as robust as people would like, but at least it is some local control. And it could be a deterrent for any developer, you know, to look elsewhere. And I'm just sharing that with you.
Vince, is Mr. Jackson from DNR going to be at the county board meeting Tuesday night to explain some of his permitting process on dairy?
I don't believe he's on the agenda. I did talk with Jeff Jackson. Is that the one from DNR? There's Jeff Jackson. And there has not been a permit requested in Polk County. The Polk permitting process, he said, at its fastest would take about a year. But there are public hearings included in that, so nothing's going to get snuck up on us. But I don't think he's on the agenda for the board meeting. But he's certainly aware of what's transpiring here.
Well, I must got some misinformation. Somebody told me that he was going to be at a county board meeting.
There was some talk about him being here at this committee meeting.
He's scheduled to come next month to give his presentation on the permitting process.
Here to this point.
So that'll be exciting and informational. Amy? Brian, you get another comment? Bob, you have another comment?
I read, Jason has also contacted the state agencies, and I don't know what you're interested in.
Yeah, definitely, you've been a big resource.
So it's kind of a little bit confusing, as it's said, that Jeff Jackson is our DNR rep. He's the one that's permitting the CAFOs. He's the one, and then they would report to a spill, and that besides conservation board. So he's our main contact for our area. Currently, they have about 25 CAFO that they permit, and that within his area. So that basically, if you guys want to know how much staff, and that availability, he's got 25 other farms to look at, as well. His boss is Chris Clayton. He's our program specialist in that.
Yes.
And they basically said the same thing. Now, what William was referring to as far as DATCAP and DNR approval, basically, if a county enacts an ordinance with provisions that are more restrictive than NR 151, which is our stormwater and erosion control ordinances, it's our manure management ordinance, it's our nutrient management planning. Those are some of the major things that are in 151. If we go above and beyond that, we have to receive approval from the DNR or DATCAP. According to Chris, and he said most people apply to the DNR for that approval because they think it's going to be easier than going to DATCAP. And then our DATCAP rep is Jeff Jackson, Tim Jackson. Yeah, very good. So Jeff Jackson with DNR, Tim Jackson with DATCAP. They are very supportive in reviewing the county's ordinance as it is right now, the CUP process. We can do that before the county board takes action on it. What he's going to be reviewing it for would be the provisions of the administrative code, DTCP 51. Basically in 51, and then there's setbacks for manure lagoons to the property lines of 300 feet. Those are maximum setbacks. Currently what's being proposed is 200 feet. Going through the conditional use process, and that as the text is right now, maybe that there's a property owner, or maybe there's a stream or some kind of unique property that proposed table would be going up against. That the committee could require that maximum of 300 feet. However, the committee could not require less than 200 feet. So there is that flexibility in that the committee could still require up to the maximum standard. Basically, in that, if we were to send the CUP conditions and that to DATCAP for their review, unlike our shoreland ordinance where, you know, if something's not regulated in the administrative code, then it's up to the county if they want to take and, you know, have conditions on that. With livestock sighting is basically they would go through 51 and they would take and say, okay, this condition's okay, this condition's not in there, or it's more restrictive than 51, so we're going to take and strike that or suggest that the county removes that. And that's basically what they're going to give you. So it's not, you know, that the county can go above and beyond 51. It's basically going to come right back down to livestock sighting. So, and then at that point, you know, that the CUP process is going to have a lot less effect in the county because you might be better off with a sighting ordinance that's going to apply countywide. But then you have to, you know, acknowledge the staff time and the other resources and the lack of the county's ability to create these unique provisions that you guys want as part of your ordinance. And that because you're basically going to be going to whatever the state tells you.
Well, I can tell you, every farmer is familiar with 151, but NR 151, and it's pretty restrictive, and it's pretty much neighbor watching neighbors, and it's a program that works real well. And if you talk to the farmers, they don't need much more paperwork that they can handle without having more professional help.
Correct. I mean, the county's land and water office does a great job working with farmers to get nutrient management plans, to do watershed studies. All of that is related to the stormwater and nutrient management standards that are in 151.
So every farmer has to have a management plan for their manure and meet water quality standards.
The proposed CUP standards right now, when I was on the phone with Jeff and Tim Jackson, I think we're okay. I don't think we're more restrictive than either one of those guys right now. However, that if we do send it off to DATCAP, like I said, his review is going to be reviewing his administrative code for the CUP.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's necessary right now, but and if the county board would like to see where DATCAP and the DNR stand on it, you know, have to do that as well.
Amy, do you have another question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to point out, and correct me if I'm wrong, these guys hear from me a lot, so, but one of the things about the CUP that we have as a public health consideration is that the townships that are unzoned do not unfortunately fall under a CUP, and those are the towns that are actually being targeted by the CAFO operation. So that's a couple thousand families that actually are sort of looking at being unzoned at the township level and then not having the county piece cover them. So I've been always trying to figure out, okay, how do we do some stuff up front preventive wise in public health as opposed to having a spill and then we're scrambling, and how do we cover these unzoned towns? I mean, we can all say we wish they would all come into zoning, and they maybe will or maybe won't. The problem is if they don't, and in the meantime, we'll have, you know, next to a zone township, a problem that the county won't have any issues. So that's with the CUP, I get a little wrapped around the axle on that one.
That's a good point, because contaminants don't have town boundaries. So if groundwater is contaminated because there's a, industrial plant, CAFO, or a spill from a municipality or an area, it impacts all of us. So I get that. And, we're working with what we have. And it's not to say that we can't go around and have the same ordinance, but we started with the CUP. Again, it's a tool or a toolbox for some local control.
Farmington and St. Croix Falls are the two unserved townships in Polk County, but they're still, everybody has to go under NR 151.
Yeah, I could just clarify that, Mr. Chair, if you'd like. And we actually have 3 towns that have.
There's another one there.
And then, so that'd be Garfield, Farmington, and St. Croix Falls. Those towns, and that, I believe that Garfield does have people rules. And then, of course, anything within their shoreline areas, the following the county shoreline ordinance, which you guys have already made that policy, and the people, swine people, will be prohibited within those areas. So those 3 have already been kind of addressed in the shoreline areas, but it's up to them to create their own. And we heard here about the other towns that are unzoned. That's our Sterling, Lake Town, Grand Falls, Lorraine, and Georgetown. So that's a total of 8 towns, or roughly 1/3 of the county. That has not fall under this conditional use table. The shoreline areas are protected, which is 1,000 feet from the ordinary high water mark on a pond or lake, and that county wide right now.
Jason.
Do you have a question or comment?
So areas like Georgetown where it's really wet, it's pretty prohibitive for setting up a CAFO in that town. Because of the major land use decision that was passed earlier this year to restrict these type of operations in the shoreline district.
I have a question for you. Stop me if I'm wrong, but how did we get into this fix to begin with? You have 2 other counties that they tried to get into and they got knocked out. One was, wasn't it Barron and Burnett?
And that currently right now from Jeff Jackson with the DNR, it sounds like there is a pending application under Cumberland LLC in Burnett County. I'm not aware of anything in Barron County at this time, but Burnett County has got the moratorium in place similar to Polk. They're going through much of the same process up there. But then the way that it started here was because that pending application, and that was made aware of to Nick Osborne, our county administrator at the time, about having possibly very large furrowing operations or the actual finishing operations scattered throughout northern Polk County. And then that started a bunch of public comment, and our environmental services committee started to try to address, that the potential of CAFOs in Polk County in the future. So at that time, and that the committee looked at 3 different ordinances. They considered all the staff time and resources and how things would apply throughout the county. And those options were the CUP process, the livestock sighting ordinance, which would be administered through Land and Water Resources, or doing an operational ordinance, which kind of falls underneath the general health statutes and the statutes of the general authorities of the county. And so they looked at those 3 options, but because of resources and the enforceability of a lot of the siting law and having more freedom, because a lot of the public comment that they had was specific to like driveway separation distances and providing contact numbers and stuff. That's not citing information or citing ordinance based. So that's why they went with the CUP route.
That Cumberland application was mentioned on yesterday, but they never carried it any farther. And one thing that we need more information on is livestock sighting aspect of the situations.
That's one positive to livestock sighting, because it does apply to all those towns, everybody. However, in that one thing that you lose big time with the livestock sighting ordinance is there's no public input process in that process. So if I was a swine cable producer, I go in, I buy a 40, I'm talking with Eric, and then I say, yep, okay, I don't meet all your requirements, and then I work through, get this permit process, I work with DNR and DACAP, and I start building, that, whereas right now, the neighbors can have some input, neighbors can influence the committee to assign additional conditions, need to protect natural resources through a CUP process by, having them do additional monitoring if they see fit, or locating certain structures in certain locations so that they are not right next to a stream or a creek or something like that, or a dry run maybe. So that's kind of the benefits of that side.
Because Land and Water Resource Department would be the department, Eric Roychek in particular, that would work with the developer to meet those ordinance requirements. You're talking about one person issuing permits.
Correct.
And doing the oversight and the drive-bys, and making sure they are in compliance. Alternatively, with the CUP process, you have a whole governing committee, environmental services committee, working with the developer to ensure they make those conditions or ensure compliance. So there's real pros and cons to each. And then who knows, if you move forward with a livestock ordinance, going forward, granted, like you said, John, we have 5 existing CAFOs now.
Correct.
So going forward, every large-scale agricultural operation will need to work with Land and Water, and to meet those needs. So there's that staffing and workflow piece as well.
So we've got one more question.
So what do you guys think would be our best next steps for protecting these other, I can't do the math, but say our county is 45,000 and a third of those people are protected. What is our best way of covering that group of our citizens?
That would be you basically got 2 options. One, the county could look at a citing ordinance, or 2, and then the towns could adopt their own ordinance. Or opt into county's own. So yeah, there's basically 3 options. That's it. Yeah. Correct, at the town level. They don't have to be part of county zoning in order to have that type of ordinance.
Well, I think we've had appropriate discussion, a lot of great information, and we gotta kind of diagnose what we've got now and go from there. So, Bob and Tanya,
Yeah, Supervisor, last time that I can't share with your process from our government community.
correct.
So anything that you want to share or bring to the people on meeting next Thursday, which is July 20th. There is again an agenda item for health and human services response to
Now you're talking the 22nd, you're talking about environmental meeting, Tim? Because we don't have another meeting in July as health and human services. So Amy, you're gonna be working with environmental but I don't know if we're correct in saying that those 8 townships are protected because they still comply with the 151 and so those residents, they're subject to some laws and.
Along with the zoning regulation, we're within 1,000 feet of water.
Yeah. So we'll bring the discussion to close on this.
Can I?
You can make comment.
I'm curious, does this committee need to decide what they want to say?
Yeah. So the committee does, there's 2 things I think that are pending right now. There's the motion that was handed out that and I can make a motion on this, and then we have the bill one, which is the WCA motion supporting, if we want to do that, would be kind of a feel-good motion to send this up to the WCA. Do you want to make that motion, Bill?
Certainly, I would make a motion that we would pass on the WCA Association resolution to the Environmental Services Committee.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Supervisor, or by Bill Lubick, committee member, and seconded by Member Faye Duncanson. Discussion on the motion. I think we've had a lot of discussion today. Any questions or discussion? Joe?
Now, is this gonna be going to Maria for?
Everything goes to Maria for review.
Yes, okay. Yes.
Question answered. Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimous. Anything else on the agenda?
One copy that's in front of you, that is, that the motion to help the purchase committee to consider the file information of public health impact and acting for ordinances, et cetera. I make a motion that this goes to environmental services.
So you're just saying you want this document to be delivered to environmental services? Because what I think I heard the gentleman say is that they would be taking the discussion that was held here today, including your desire specifically to this, and presenting it. Is that? Okay.
Just making sure that they're gonna get a copy of it.
But no, but you didn't vote on, because this really, this is a resolution using a different words.
Remember we were talking about what do we do, and I've got that, so we should do the motion piece that communicates in a short timeline to the environmental services, and then we could.
But the underlying desire of this, not necessarily, okay.
And then you make it into resolution, so I should correct that.
The resolution for the full county board. Yes, and I will do that as long as there's a consensus here.
Okay, so the first motion on the table.
I'm asking the clerk to read the resolution, or read the motion.
So what I have for her is the rules that the HHS recommends the desired estimate of written to the ESC. That's what I've got for her.
Yeah, and then there'll be a second motion on going to.
So we have to take one vote at a time, unless you have an amendment.
Okay, she spoke to the resolution when she read it. Do you have the first and second written down?
Yep, it's Middleton and Wilson, got it.
Okay, no more discussion on the motion. All for, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimous. Did you want an amendment or are we all there?
It already passed, so no amendments to that.
Now we do this second one, which would be, but this would be basically taking this motion that we just sent to environmental services and turning it into resolution.
For the full county board to, yes, and I'll draft that and.
No, we don't need a motion.
Well, you would, under your rules of order.
So that's my motion, and then I guess we need that.
Also. Wait a minute, one at a time.
Yeah.
The clerk is gonna have the motion, I gotta have her read the motion and present.
Do you want me to say it? Yes. So Supervisor Middleton makes a motion to have this committee ask Corporation Counsel to draft a resolution for consideration at the full county board that embodies the concepts of the motion that went to environmental services regarding CAFOs.
Okay, I've got a motion from Middleton and Devlin, recommend that, corporate counsel to draft resolution next to the county. Oh. That are also the types of.
Okay, hearing
environmental services and then county board?
No, it's going to the county board. From what she is gonna be writing up, it's gonna be going down to the county board, but it's gonna encompass the same desires that are being presented at environmental.
So it's like a tweak with the environmental. Okay. All in favor?
Can't hear a word.
Yeah, I'm pressing Jason.
Can't hear you.
Yeah. Okay, can you hear me now? Hey, by the way, I saw you limping out there. You okay?
I'll explain.
All in favor of the motion that Gordon presented, say aye. Aye. Negative? Hearing none, motion carried unanimous. Okay, we've got 3 motions that can go into resolution form.
Comment, can I make a comment?
You certainly were under discussion.
I certainly understand the concept of conditional use permit better. That is actually favorable for Polk County. And I think maybe this should be somehow public by the Environmental Services Committee. Not detrimental to Polk County.
The last one is identifying subject matter for our next meeting, which will be August 11th. How did the people, I want to kind of ask anybody, how do you like the time release? Do you want to mix it up somehow, or do you like the 10 o'clock or 1 o'clock, or anybody that's got anything to say, I'd like to hear it. You like 10 o'clock?
10 o'clock is better.
Okay, so our August 11 meeting will go back to 10 o'clock. And Tanya, I appreciate that you canvassed the committee as to our time change today. So, motion to adjourn. Motion by Supervisor Demling, seconded by committee member Oliva. All in favor, say aye. Aye. No negative. Adjourned.
I was on vacation. I don't remember. Skipping them off and didn't know where they were.
Oh my God.
Did not break the skin.
Yeah.
There was a lump there. Yeah. I had it repaired a week later or something.